There was a surgeon in New York, back in the 1950s, who could give almost anyone a new face. An hour on his table, and the crooked nose was made straight, the old scar was gone, the feature a person had hated their whole life was simply erased. And most of them walked out into what looked like a new life. But not all of them. A portion of his patients would stand in front of the mirror, looking at a flawless new face and still see the old ugliness staring back. Still feel like the same small, defeated person they had always been. The scalpel had changed the face. It had not touched whatever was actually running their life. That surgeon spent years chasing the reason why, and what he found is the same thing 4 old teachers had been saying for 100 years, and the same thing brain scientists can now watch happen on a screen. The person you quietly assume yourself to be is the master command your whole life obeys. Change the outside, and nothing moves. But change that inner assumption, truly begin to live, as though the thing has already worked out, and the brain itself starts to rewire to make it true. His name was Maxwell Maltz, and today I am going to show you exactly what happens inside your head when you assume it is already done, why it is not wishful thinking but measurable machinery, and how to hand your own mind that instruction tonight. Step 1. The surgeon who found the real scar. Let me tell you what Maltz actually noticed, because it is stranger than any theory. Person after person came to him certain that if he could just fix the nose, the ears, the scar, then finally they would feel like enough. And in most cases it worked. The face changed and the person bloomed. But some of them changed nothing at all on the inside. New face, same misery. They went on behaving, feeling, and living exactly as if they still carried the old deformity. And he realized, with a kind of shock, that he had been operating on the wrong thing. The ugliness these people could not escape was not on their skin. It was in the picture they carried of themselves, on the inside, in the dark. He gave that picture a name. He called it the self-image. And he came to believe it was the single most important discovery of his life, that a human being always acts like the person they conceive themselves to be, not the person they wish to be, not the person they talk about being, the person they assume, underneath everything, that they already are. And here is what almost no one stops to realize. You did not choose that picture. It was assembled for you by a childhood, by the offhand words of people who were tired or afraid, by 100 small verdicts you absorbed before you were old enough to refuse them. You have been carrying an image of yourself you never once sat down and agreed to, which means you have every right to set it down and build a new one on purpose. That is not arrogance. That is taking back a pen that was always yours. You never outperform that inner picture for long. You can want more, work harder, force yourself for a while, but you always drift back to the level of the self you believe you are. It is a thermostat. Set it to 65, and it does not matter how warm the day gets, the room comes back to 65. Set your self-image at struggle, at not for me, at people like me don't, and every burst of effort cools right back to that number. You have watched this happen to people. Someone comes into a sudden windfall, an inheritance, a settlement, a run of pure luck, far more than they have ever held. And a few years on, somehow, they are back almost exactly where they began, as if pulled home by gravity. The number in the account changed. The picture they carried of themselves did not, and the picture is the stronger force. It will quietly spend, lose, or sabotage its way back to the figure it believes it deserves. This was never really about money. It is about every ceiling you keep hitting and cannot explain. This is exactly where most of the modern advice fails, and fails honestly. Somebody grits their teeth and white-knuckles the new diet, the new budget, the new morning routine, running on pure willpower. And it holds for a week, a month. Then it snaps back, every time, and they call themselves weak. They were not weak. They fought the behavior and never once touched the self-image underneath it, and the self-image always wins in the end, because the behavior was only ever its shadow. So here is the shift the whole rest of this rests on. To assume that it has already worked out is not a trick of positive thinking. It is the deliberate act of resetting that thermostat, of installing a new self-image, of choosing to move through the world as the person for whom the thing is already done. Neville Goddard called it living in the end. Maltz called it changing the self-image. One spoke the language of the soul, the other the language of the nervous system. They found the same door. Step 2. The brain cannot tell assumed from actual. Now, why would assuming something change anything real? This is where it stops being philosophy and becomes physiology, and it is the finding that made Maltz famous. He wrote that experimental and clinical psychologists had proven, beyond any real doubt, that the human nervous system cannot tell the difference between an experience that actually happened and one imagined vividly and in detail. To the deep machinery of the brain, a scene rehearsed richly enough is not a fantasy about the future. It is a memory. It is data. It gets filed as something that happened to you. You already know this is true, because your body has proven it to you in the dark. You have woken from a nightmare with your heart slamming, your skin damp, your breath ragged over an event that never took place. Nothing happened, and yet every alarm in your body fired as if it had. That is the whole principle, running in the wrong direction. Your nervous system reacted, fully and physically, to a picture your mind was holding. Now turn that same power around and point it at the life you actually want. When you sit with the end scene, the thing already worked out, the relationship healed, the work finished, the number in the account, the calm in your own chest, and you make it vivid, and you let yourself feel it as done, your brain does not label it someday. It begins to treat it as a fact about your world. It starts adjusting you to a reality in which this is already true. This is why acting as if is not silly. It is the most efficient instruction you can give. The teacher said, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The surgeon said, run the experience in the theater of your mind until the nervous system accepts it. Same instruction. The image, held with feeling, is experienced by the brain as real, and the brain then goes to work, making the rest of you consistent with what it now believes has happened. This is why people who rehearse an action only in their minds, never moving a muscle, still measurably improve at the real thing when they finally attempt it. The brain laid down the pattern in advance. It had already, in every way that mattered to itself, done the thing. So when the moment came, the body was not learning from nothing, it was remembering. Assume the end vividly enough, often enough, and you are not preparing to become that person one day. As far as your nervous system is concerned, you already are, and it simply waits for the outside world to catch up and confirm it. You are not lying to yourself when you do this. You are giving the one part of you that cannot argue back the only kind of evidence it accepts. Step 3. What fires together, wires together. But a single rehearsal is not enough, and here is the part that turns all of this from a nice idea into a physical process you can trust, because the brain is not fixed. It is not the finished, hardened organ people used to think it was. It is clay, and it is being reshaped every day of your life by whatever you keep running through it. There was a neuroscientist named Donald Hebb who laid down the principle back in 1949. When two neurons fire at the same time, again and again, the connection between them physically strengthens. It thickens. It becomes a well-worn path. The popular way people say it now is simple enough to remember for the rest of your life. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Sit with what that means for the assumption you are choosing to hold. Every time you return to the end, the felt scene of it already done, you fire a specific pattern of cells. Do it once, and it is a faint trail in tall grass, gone by morning. Do it every day, with feeling, and you are laying down a road. The thought becomes a groove, the groove becomes a highway, and one day the identity that used to take effort to imagine has become the most natural thing you own. You have not just pictured a new self. You have grown the wiring of one. And the feeling is, what does the wiring? This is the piece people skip, and it is why the flat, mechanical repeating of words in front of a mirror does so little. Dry words fired without emotion make a thin, weak connection the brain forgets by lunch. But an image soaked in feeling real gratitude, real relief, the warmth of the thing being true, fires the whole circuit hot, and the brain wires what is emotionally charged first and deepest. The feeling is the voltage. It is the current that drives the picture down out of the daydreaming mind and into the tissue where it starts to hold. And it asks for repetition, not intensity. You cannot wire a new self in one dramatic night of visualizing and then wonder why nothing held by the weekend. The brain reshapes itself the way water shapes stone, not by force, but by returning to the same spot, gently, again and again, until the channel is cut. A few quiet minutes every single day will carve a deeper groove in a month than one heroic hour ever could. This is slow work that becomes permanent work. That is the trade you are being offered, and it is a good one. If these 4 old teachers, and the science that finally caught up to them, are becoming a second voice in your head, one that answers back the tired old one, then subscribe and let them keep talking. That is what the channel is for. Step 4. The mind steers toward the target you set. So you have set a new self-image, and you are wiring it in with feeling. Now watch what it starts to do on its own, without you pushing. Maltz's great insight was that the mind, underneath the thinking part, works like an automatic guidance system. Set a clear target inside it, a vivid, felt image of the end, and it behaves like a machine built to reach that target, correcting and steering toward it without you having to consciously drive. A torpedo does not travel in a straight line. It misses, adjusts, and arrives. Give the deeper mind a definite destination, and it runs the same way, quietly moving your instincts, your choices, your words, your timing, all toward the thing you have assumed is already yours. Part of how it does this is a real structure in your brainstem, a filter that decides every second which tiny fraction of the flood of the world actually reaches your awareness. You have felt it work. In a loud, crowded room full of noise you have completely tuned out, someone across the whole space says your name and you hear it instantly, cutting straight through. That filter was told your name matters, so it lets your name through. It was screening it the entire time. Now understand. That filter takes its orders from your self-image. Assume you are someone for whom money is scarce and opportunity is rare, and it dutifully filters out the openings, the ideas, the people, keeping the world looking exactly as poor as you believe it is. Assume the thing has already worked out. Install the new self, and the filter changes its orders. Suddenly you notice the door that was always there, the conversation that leads somewhere, the idea that was waiting in plain sight. The world did not rearrange itself. Your eyes were finally allowed to see what was in it. That is not magic. That is your own machinery, pointed at last in your favor. Step 5. The proof arrives to finish the belief. Now I have to be honest with you about the order this happens in, because it is not the order you would choose, and this is where most people quit 3 feet from the gold. You would like the proof first. You would like to see the evidence, and then believe. But this law runs backwards. You are asked to feel it finished before a single fact agrees with you. For a while, and it can be an uncomfortable, while you will be holding the assumption in one hand and your same old circumstances in the other, and the gap between them is where nearly everyone lets go. They wanted the belief to be safe before they risked it, but the assumption is the seed, and you do not dig up a seed each morning to check whether it has sprouted. You keep it in the dark, and you keep it warm. And that discomfort in the gap, that itch to check, to measure, to demand a sign, is not a warning that it is failing. It is the old self-image feeling the ground move under it and complaining. The 4 teachers all taught the same discipline at this exact point, each in his own words. Hold the feeling, refuse the evidence of your senses a little longer, and let the assumption do its quiet work unwatched. The one who can dwell in the finished thing without breaking to look is the one for whom the finished thing arrives. And then the confirmations begin. Small at first, a strange coincidence, an idea that will not leave you alone, a message from someone you had half forgotten, a door, ajar, that used to be locked. And here is the thing you must understand. Each of those is not the reward at the end. Each one is a log thrown on the fire evidence the brain now uses to wire the new self deeper, so the assumption stops being something you are choosing and becomes something you simply know. The proof does not come after the belief is finished. The proof is what finishes building it. There was a young man in Dublin, not many years ago, who understood this in his bones. He was broke, genuinely broke, collecting a welfare check of €188 every single week. And in those exact years, with nothing in his hand to justify it, he later said he used his imagination, visualizing good things in the middle of the struggle. He pictured championship belts. He lived inside his own head as a man who had already won. The week of his first big fight, he was still in the queue for that welfare check on his way to the airport. Days later, he stepped into the cage and won in 67 seconds. Within a few years, he was one of the highest paid athletes on the planet. His name is Conor McGregor, and when he could finally afford a yacht, he named it the 188 after the welfare check, so he would never forget the order it all happened in. The assuming came first. The proof came to catch up. He said it plainly. If you can see it, and you have the courage to speak it, it will happen. Step 6. How to assume it tonight. So, let me put this in your hands as something to actually do, not just admire, because wisdom you only nod at changes nothing. First, choose your end. Not the whole distant dream, the single scene that would only be true if the thing had already worked out. Not I want the job, but the quiet moment of walking out, having been told it is yours. Not I want to be well, but the ordinary morning of moving through your day in a body that feels fine. Make it small, specific, and finished. An event, not a wish. Second, find the drowsy edge of your day the last few minutes before sleep, when the thinking mind has loosened its grip and the door to the deeper mind stands open. Enter the scene there. See it from the inside, through your own eyes, not watching yourself on a screen. And then, above everything, feel it, the relief, the quiet gratitude, the naturalness of it simply being so. Stay in that feeling until it is the truest thing in the room. That is the impression. That is the instruction laid down. Third, and this is where the day people fail, carry the assumption into daylight. Walk through tomorrow as a person for whom this is already handled. Let it change one small thing: how you answer, what you say yes to, how you carry your shoulders. The self-image is fed by evidence, and the strongest evidence you can give it is your own behavior agreeing with it. And do not strain for it. Strain tells the deeper mind the thing is far away and hard to reach. Ease tells it the thing is near and already so. You are not begging for a future that might come. You are remembering one that already has. Light, certain, and often that is the whole art of it. This is a practice, not a stunt, and a practice needs a form. That is why I made a free daily auto-suggestion sheet, a single page that walks you through the exact morning and evening impression, so the new self gets fed twice a day instead of left to chance. And it comes with 3 short lessons on how to feel it as done, which is the part that makes it take. It is the first link in the description. Claim it, and hand your deeper mind the same instruction every day until the day it stops arguing and starts agreeing. You were never going to force your way into a new life by effort alone. The thermostat would have pulled you back every time. You are going to assume your way in quietly, daily, felt as already done, and let the brain you were given rewire itself, cell by cell, around the person you have decided to be. And what I have shown you today is one working part of a much larger machine. The self-image, the felt end, the wiring, the guidance system, the honest order of proof, these are pieces of a complete method the 4 teachers spent their lives mapping. The whole of it, arranged in order and walked step by step with a workbook so none of it stays abstract, lives inside the second life, our community and course. It used to sit behind a serious one-time price. We have lately opened the door so that a committed person can begin at no cost, and I cannot promise how long it stays that way. If you are still here at the end of a video like this, it was built for someone exactly like you. That is the second link. The old teachers called it faith, the surgeon called it the self-image, the scientists call it wiring. It is the same law wearing 3 different coats. And it is sitting there right now, in the dark behind your eyes, waiting for you to hand it its first real instruction. Assume it is already done, then go and let the world catch up.